Hi, I'm Nadine Battah, and I'm the editor-in-chief of Professional Tool and Equipment News. The tools in your shop are more than just equipment. They're the bridge between a technician's skill and a customer's trust. As vehicles become more complex, shops need more than wrenches and sockets to get the job done right. In today's episode, we'll be talking with Pico Technology Automotive about how advanced diagnostic equipment complements traditional hand tools and how toolkits have evolved to meet the challenges of modern vehicles. We'll also look ahead at where technology is taking us and what innovations technicians should be preparing for in the future. Joining me today for this discussion is Justin Morgan, Automotive Technical Specialist for Pico Technology Automotive. Justin, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Of course, let's go ahead and just dive right into this. So, Pico Technology Automotive is best known for its high precision oscilloscopes, data loggers, and diagnostic kits. How do you see traditional hand tools fitting into or complementing these high-tech systems in a modern workshop?
The purpose of the oscilloscope is always to try to aid the hand tool. So, oftentimes in the automotive world, we're in a rush to hurry up and take things apart, try to find the problem. That often leads to a lot of lost time or a lot of disassembly in vain, as we call it. So, the oscilloscope allows us to narrow down the point of a problem. It's a precision instrument, so it allows us to get much closer to the issue. In the case of mechanical diagnostics for an engine, oftentimes if we have a misfire and we deem it to be mechanical through traditional methods, whether it's compression test, leak down test, there's still a fair amount of guesswork involved as you start actually taking the engine apart. You're not exactly sure what you're going to find. Whereas using the oscilloscope from Pico, like our 4425A and our WPS 500 pressure transducer, I'm able to know before I go in, whether it's bottom end, top end, and if it's top end, is it on the intake or exhaust side? So now when I go in and I take that valve cover off of an engine, I know exactly what I should see. There's not going to be any hunting around trying to find something. I know that I had an intake issue or I had an exhaust issue, and as I tear it down. So it's not a replacement, but it definitely aids in a more skillful use of those hand tools. The all of your hand tools still do everything that they're going to do and they have done for the last 100 years, but it just reduces the amount of time that we're using those hand tools because we're able to pinpoint in on that problem before we disassemble.
That's fantastic. And I feel like that also just reduces time in general, right? And I feel like as the shops get busier, time is much more valuable. So these tools can definitely help with saving time. So, can you walk us through how Pico's equipment, like the oscilloscopes or data loggers, is incorporated into everyday shop routines? For instance, how does a technician actually use them during diagnostics along with familiar mechanical tools?
Sure. So, like I mentioned a minute ago with mechanical testing, a lot of shops, especially with the complex engines that we have now, the more emissions we put on the engines, the lighter we make them, all the things that get done to them, it seems like to us, the reliability of those engine packages has gone down. So, the last 10 years of my career, I probably did more mechanical diag and repair than I did the first related to engines. The first 10, 11 years, it was probably a lot of misfires and tune-ups and things of that nature. Towards the end of my career, it was more having to replace valve train components, having to replace engines. So a lot of shops now have moved from doing mechanical compression tests or cylinder leak down tests to doing those in cylinder tests that I talked about with the oscilloscope with our Pico 4425A,
Mhm.
and that allows them to see the function of every stroke that engine makes, every event that happens inside that engine they can see. um, and again, it's going to be in conjunction with those hand tools to take the engine apart. Other things are, the more complex an engine gets, the harder it is to access things. So just a simple spark plug change to do a compression test on an engine is very lengthy. And like you said a minute ago, it pays for us to be more proficient and faster. Not haste fast, but proficiently fast. Because at the end of the day, a shop makes all of its money on time.
Yes.
Even if the technician's not on a flat rate pay scale, they're still, everything they do is based on time because there's only so much work time in a day. So being able to get that done, but a lot of shops have moved from doing mechanical compression testing to in-cylinder compression testing or relative compression testing to determine the engine state. Also, just starting with a set of spark plugs for a misfire.
Mhm.
Again, when it's 4 to 6 to 7 hours to put a set of spark plugs in a car, that's maybe not the best choice.
Right.
So being able to scope the ignition system and determine whether or not it's an electrical ignition system misfire, that is something else. And then we actually have a battery test in our Pico Diagnostics software that uses the scope. And a lot of shops are starting to use it more than they do their conventional conductance type battery tests, because it incorporates a very heavy load on the engine from the engine starter, which is everything the battery is based off of, is how much current it's going to take to run that starter to start the engine. That's one of the primary functions. So that's a very good load test. So a lot of shops are moving to using that pretty regularly, and it's a very quick and easy test. So again, it's back to that proficiency and that time thing.
That's really excellent. Now, beyond the core instruments, are there specific handheld accessories, probes, test leads, or adapters that you'd recommend every shop keeps on hand to maximize effectiveness with Pico's gear?
For sure. So obviously, with the scope itself is useful, but you have to have all the accessories. So right out of the get go, you have to have test leads, and I would equate that to, you don't necessarily want tennis shoes without laces. One is not going to function without the other. But then you start adding in being able to do different levels of testing. So, current probes to do current ramp testing or relative compression testing is very important. We have several. If you're using our latest hardware, our 4425A or 4225A, those are BNC plus scopes. So those current clamps, they're different than your standard BNC current clamps that everybody has already, meaning that one, they're a lot cleaner because they're powered off of the scope itself. And because they're powered off of the scope itself, we don't have to worry about 9-volt batteries dying. We don't have to worry about constantly feeding and ordering 9-volt batteries. Some other things that we have that are completely standalone is we do offer a multimeter. And the multimeter actually is an insulation tester as well. So it's our TA467 is a really good product, and it covers multiple uses. There's times where guys just want to have a voltmeter or an ohm meter or do inline live current measurement. But as we start moving into hybrid and EV, I say moving in, it's been here for 20 years, but as shops become more open to working on those type vehicles, they're going to need things like the insulation meter. And then we have separate products that going to cover things like, we have a milliohm and three-phase motor test, the MT03A. So that we have a wide range of products. Just about anything you could think to test on an automobile, we have covered, in accessories and probes.
Yeah, no, it absolutely sounds like it. And which leads me to this question. You guys have a long history. So Pico was founded in 1991 and has pioneered PC-based oscilloscopes, even winning awards for innovations like the USB-based Pico Scope and Automotive Diagnostics Kit. How have shop toolkits, especially those involving electronics diagnostics, evolved since then, and how has Pico adapted to those changes?
So that's a pretty big question. So yes, Pico started out 1991. Our founder Alan Tong released the ADC-10, which was game changing. Now it was on what we call the test and measurement side. So Pico Technology does have two houses. We have the test and measurement side, which is more for our E&E crowd, and then we have the automotive division. Now the automotive division started in 1997 with our first offering, the ADC 101, which was a serial port scope. If you fast forward a little bit further up to 2005, 2006, we released our first USB based oscilloscope, the 34 series, 3423 for automotive. And then, by 2008, we had the WPS 500, which I've mentioned a couple times. That is probably one of our most popular products. And I know it's one of my favorite tools. As we continued to move through, we added in noise, vibration, and harshness diagnostics in 2014. 2014, we released the 4425, which went from having shared ground across all channels to having individual grounds. There was some other improvements there, but that was the big one. And then 2021, we released publicly PicoScope 7 software to run the scope. And that was a game changer because the software is designed for ease of usability. You know, PicoScope 6 was great, but PS7 is really designed for speed. The sole intent there is all of your core features, the main things you're going to use, 80, 90% of the time are designed to be 2 or 3 mouse clicks away. So you're not having a deep dive into menus to get to things. And then it was optimized for touchscreen. So we have large buttons, and it's just because pretty much every computer you buy now is a touchscreen. So we continually adapt and move things. Even up until last year, we released the TA511, which is our 1400 volt BNC plus differential probe for high voltage diagnosis on electric vehicles and hybrid. So we're constantly looking for things. For listeners that may be listening to this, Pico's always interested in product ideas or suggestions. If you guys have suggestions, you can send them in on picoauto.com, our website. There's a support tab. You can fill out a feedback form with any product ideas or suggestions you may have. And even actually in the software itself, if you go to your side panel and click more, there is a feedback button, and you can actually submit feedback directly from the program itself. And I promise you, every one of those gets read. Any of them that come from the automotive side, they're going to get sent to the automotive team. And at least one, if not all of us, are going to read that feedback, because it's always our job to push any ideas or suggestions from customers into the software team or into the product development team. So if you guys have ideas, by all means, we're open. Send them to us.
That's fantastic. Customer feedback is super important, and that's great to hear that you guys value that. Now, looking ahead, where do you see the convergence between traditional hand tools and electronic diagnostic tools? Are there upcoming innovations that technicians should be excited about?
So, you know, we've said this my whole career, and the guys that I trained under, they said it their whole career. I was actually just talking to my first real shop foreman, sent me a text the other day. He's in his mid 70s now.
Wow.
And the amount of things that he went through and the things that I have experienced in the career as far as technology changing, it's only, you're only limited by your mind in what we can see coming. I don't think that we're ever going to see any change in how your advanced diagnostic tooling or your electronic diagnostic tooling works with hand tools, because as of right now, that's most of the guide, unless it's a typical mechanical repair like suspension or something. You're going to be guided by diagnostics to get to the point where you are taking apart or replacing components. So that marriage is always going to be there. I don't think it's going to change. I think it's always going to be a 50-50. What I think, though, is people are going to realize more that the diagnostics need to come first, not second. Fight that urge. As a technician, our urge is to hurry up and take something apart. And being able to value that with diagnostics, using the 4425A, using PicoScope 7 to determine what direction I'm going and what part of an engine or what part of a system to take apart. Even looking at communication networks, that's all electronic, but all of those modules are buried in the car. So I may spend 2 or 3 hours diagnosing it. I may only spend an hour or two actually replacing that component. So that marriage is always going to be there. And of course, to get to that component, I have to remove body panels or seats or carpet and then actually unbolt the module. So the hand tools are always going to be in play. As far as upcoming innovations, like I said a minute ago, Pico is always looking for good ideas. We're always innovating. There's always something brewing in the product development. I don't have anything I can share today, but just rest assured that there's a whole team within Pico that probably 24 hours a day, all they're doing is thinking about the next thing we can put out to help our customers. Because the one good thing about Pico is everybody on the T&M side has T&M experience. Everybody on the automotive side has automotive experience. So that is a huge advantage, and it allows us to really make sure that products we're releasing are suited for automotive. And sometimes it's just as simple as a way we put a kit together. If you look at our catalog, you can see that we have a bunch of different scope kits, and they're designed for different sects of automotive repair. So we have, our standard 4425A diagnostic kit. We also have an off-highway kit. We have a diesel kit, and those kits are tailored around the environment they're going to be used in. Our off-highway kit, it eliminates some of the things that don't exist on diesel engines. So there's no ignition test components because you don't have spark plugs and ignition systems in diesels, but it adds in the fact that the scope has a more rugged boot on it, so it's more impact resistant, and it's also dust related. So there's dust covers over like the USB port and thing, because we know off highway guys are going to be off highway. They're going to be on construction sites. They're going to be in rough conditions working on equipment. So sometimes our innovations are just as simple as putting together a kit tailored for one department. And then the last thing is we do have a couple of things I can tell you about as far as innovation goes. They're not necessarily products, but the off highway has become a big sector for us to work in. And right now, the marine section is becoming in. We've got a partner in the marine industry that has been phenomenal. And the marine industry has taken off with Picoscope because, as I mentioned earlier, working on cars is getting harder. Working on boats has always been hard, especially inboards. There's just not a lot of access. It's very lengthy to get into things. So one of the things that we started working with our marine partner is we now have marine waveforms in our reference waveform library on the software. And we are also working on adding in some guided tests specifically for marine applications. So personal watercraft, boats, and even ships. So that's, the innovation isn't always just a product. Sometimes it is also features that make it easier or better to use for a new type of user. So
Very cool and very exciting news for Pico. And that wraps up today's toolbox topic. As we've heard, the right combination of diagnostic equipment and hand tools can make all the difference in a modern shop. Thanks again to Justin Morgan of Pico Technology Automotive for sharing his insights, and thank you for watching. Stay tuned for more toolbox topics where we'll continue exploring the tools and techniques that keep your shop ahead of the curve. Thanks again.
thanks for having me.